Welcome to another episode of V4Veganism. I am here with prominent New York City activist, animal rights activist, Leo Nardo.
How you doing?
Thank you, Leo, so much for coming on the show and speaking with us. So you do so much for the animal rights movement here in New York, but you were definitely not always vegan.
Most definitely not.
Yeah. There's a photo I saw that you had shared, and
With the burgers?
Yeah, and the caption being, that you would always take this like food challenge and you would go anywhere and like eat the whole thing. How did you get from that guy to the person that you are now?
It was a long and arduous journey, and I could give you some kind of textbook bullshit that did not happen, although it was definitely long and arduous. Grew up in New York, Brooklyn guy, born and raised, toxic masculinity up the wazoo.
That's so not who you are now, so that's amazing to me.
Yeah, but I was not always the calm, peaceful individual you have come to know. Yeah, grew up, my parents were both from immigrant backgrounds. My father's from Mexico. My grandmother was from Poland, Holocaust survivor. And coming from a point of poverty when we were able to afford meat, it was a sign that you made it. And it was, you finish what's on your plate, and that is the expectation. And to not do so is to disrespect all the sacrifices that your family have made up until this point. But yeah, I grew up in eating everything to excess, and everything is bigger in Texas is not a lie. The giant steaks, 10-pound hamburger challenges, these were things that at some point appealed to me. And my sense of what manhood was, and the fact that I could get a free meal out of it and end up on the Wall of Fame and get a free t-shirt that says that I did it. But I've always been, that animal lover that almost everybody claims to be. I've had pets throughout my life. There was always animals in my home: cats, birds, newts, guinea pigs, turtles. Grew up by Coney Island, so going over there, and the first time I remember seeing an actual tuna and reading the description, I was in like pre-K or something like that, and my mom recalls this, that, it was like, I just wouldn't eat fish, like, for the longest, and tuna was like my shit, I was like, I'm eating tuna every day, all day, and it was like that moment of realization, but you get the, oh, we can't think about that now, or, well, they're kind of different, or whatever, bubbly lies she told me at the point, because that's what she was conditioned to believe. And then into adulthood, you start questioning things more and more. You start seeking out information for yourself, especially when you're at a point where somebody else is not paying for your food and it's not finished what I paid for, because now I had to make those purchases myself and making those conscious decisions. Did a lot of rescue for dogs, predominantly pit bulls, that were victims of dog fighting rings, and yeah, so it got me really into that. I had done a lot of volunteer work with an organization, Sean Casey Animal Rescue in South Brooklyn. That really got me to that, and ultimately the pup that entered my heart, El Jefe, who had mange, parvo, and was undersized and had some scarring on him that looked like he was going to be a bait dog. So, got that window into that, and then this is my hippie story, because we're all hippies, right? Not vegans, and those who are judging us right now. That I was with him in Prospect Park, and he's running around with all the other dogs, and then there's like squirrels and chipmunks and geese, swooping in, and there's like that moment of harmony, and it's like I put so much of myself and of my time and my energy to giving this individual a better life. How am I not drawing that connection to everything else that I just experienced right there? And it really started, getting me in that, and matching up your actions with your ethics, which is something I've always felt I was doing.
Right.
But this was definitely something that was a moment of clarity.
Yeah. So
the slap in the face.
Was that like you had that, moment, and then you were like, I'm vegan, or, did you see other things? Because I know for me, like, it took the factory farming footage for me to finally be like, whoa, what the fuck? But I also didn't have any moment of clarity before that, But was there like, was that the moment, or was there another moment that was just like, all right, I'm vegan, I'm done?
That was definitely, like, I was already like I hate even saying this as a term, but like mostly vegetarian, whatever the hell that means at the time. Where I was eating things if I was, you know, at a family function or, you know, whatever. It was just what it was at the time. And then, you know, just by happenstance or maybe by not, meeting more and more people who were of this way of thinking, and I was no longer at a place in my life where I was grasping onto whatever I had grown up with and no longer pushing these people aside. Maybe they were there all along. And a good friend of mine, you know, we got to talking about this, Maka, I don't know if you know her. Yeah, and she was like, what do you mean you gave up all this and, you know, you live your life and you're still drinking like milk, because like dairy was like the last thing to go. Right. And she's like, nah, tomorrow I'll watch other things. And I'm like, all right, sure. And I don't have a computer, so like she came and brought her computer over to my house and we sat, and like, you know, half an hour into it, you know, 40 minutes into it, an hour, and she's like, do you want to still watch this stuff? We like, yeah, let's go. Let's, you know, we watched it right through and just, we had like that discussion. Yeah. After, and like that might have, that was it, you know. So yeah, seeing it and like forcing yourself to see it, because like growing up, not so much back in the day, so to speak, but going to like punk and hardcore shows in the 90s in New York, like forever, there were people that were just tabling or giving out literature. And I am that guy, and I'm saying this to anybody who might be watching from PETA, from ALF at the time, that I know I told you to go fuck yourself, and to stop me, you know, from doing what I want to do, and, you know, my money and my choice, and, you know, I was that guy. Wow. So, you know, it's hard for many to admit who they were. Yeah. And I know that, like, and anybody watching this might apply to you or somebody that you know, will be like, well, you know, I had that moment and I heard, and then that was it. It's like, that's fucking bullshit, because you know damn well that you probably rejected it for the longest time, until a point where you were actually ready to hear it, and know that it had to come to you at the right time, and the right time can be right now, depending on how that message is being brought to you. So there are people who will think, I gotta be as hardcore, as hardline, as in your face, when more often than not, if somebody's coming to you hardcore, hardline in your face, you're gonna get hardcore and punch them back, you know, with whatever. And so it's a matter of like, perfect storm, whatever. I'm very fortunate that I had excellent people around me at the time who helped me to draw those connections that I was missing prior to.
So, were you an activist before? Like, would you say that you were like a human rights activist before you were an animal rights activist? Because you kind of, like, you just seem like this is something that you've always done.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And that goes back to kind of what I was saying prior to, like, absent of including non-human entities, non-human beings in that spectrum, you know, for the longest I thought, I am living everything that I'm preaching about, all these songs that I grew up that, you know, created my way of thinking, and you're like, yeah, fuck capitalism, and, you know, fuck normality, whatever the hell that might be, and the norm, and not including that. So most definitely, I've been a union guy for the UFT, United Federation of Teachers. Occupy Wall Street was huge when that was going down. I was still teaching at the time, full-time, so I wasn't able to commit myself as much as I would have liked to. But yeah, voter rights and, you know, things that you would think are kind of automatics for people that they don't seem to make a connection, or anybody could say, you know, fuck Trump. But beyond that statement, beyond sharing a hashtag, like, are you actually working towards doing anything?
Right. I see a lot of hashtag resist. And then I'm like, but what are you actually doing to resist?
I'm clicking on this. Is that not resistance? Like, no, that's not resistance. That's actually going with the flow. You are the majority. Yeah. You are the oppressor because you're still maintaining it, saying this is enough. And we're at a point where those who are in charge and have the most to lose want you to think you actually are resisting when you put up a hashtag. Right. They want you to think, yeah, go out and, you know, you have your thousands of people yelling in the streets, and then it's time. Right. You know, and that's one thing I know, and I guess gotten a little off track here, but that's, you know, it's life. Okay. That so much of human rights causes, unfortunately, can be rather fierce and focused and dedicated to a point. But oftentimes there aren't clear enough objectives, or people are not as willing to really do what's necessary and realize it's going to take more than going to a march. Yeah. It's going to take more than sharing a photo or a hashtag or a news article. It's going to take more than a t-shirt, you know, versus something like animal rights. You know, people say, like, you know, go out and rock the vote. You want to get Trump out of office, you want to get de Blasio out, you want to get whomever. Like, you can vote 3 times a day, if not more, every time you decide what you put into your body. Right. And that's change that you can create immediately. You know, and there's many who I had considered allies previously, and I still do. They don't necessarily see me the same way if they don't see my face at the same previous rallies I was a regular at for human rights issues. And like, well, you only care about the animals now. It's like, no, that's not true. But you can also do both rather easily. Right. You know, if you don't want to go out and campaign against the horse carriage industry, against the fur industry, against caporos, which we all had and we'll definitely be talking about a lot more in depth soon. You can go out and fight all these human rights causes and just abstain from being that oppressor to all these billions of animals around the world. You don't have to add to it. You don't have to, it's not really giving up anything. You just decide to not take what was never yours to begin with, you know, and that's a message that anybody who's really against the notion of oppression should be able to embody. Yeah. Immediately. You know, and I've participated in certain events and I've, you know, have friends who still do, and it's not to say that they're agendas are misguided or that their goals are, you know, that we don't necessarily want the same things, but are they looking to really be self-critical of all of what they do? And we should be able to say the same of ourselves. You know, like, I've had some of the greatest conversations about improving my practice as an animal rights activist in talking to friends that are affiliated with Black Lives Matter, affiliated with friends who are fighting the immigration laws right now. And even though we don't necessarily jive on everything that we are choosing to devote the most of our time, we respect the fact that we are both pursuing a goal greater than ourselves. And, you know, it's excellent to be able to do that, to look back at, you know, the history of the civil rights movement, you know, and what was able to get done without all this, without this conversation taking place, without reaching out through social media, you know, and how much took place even, you know, without cell phones. And you're going to be at a place and you show up, and that should be enough, you know. So, like, look back to what is very much possible and has in many ways shaped the current future, which will, you know, and will shape tomorrow, because we don't need all this. And here we are on social media, so, you know, there's that. That's part also of being a better activist and in allowing yourself to grow, is you can't be too connected to any one facet of activism, and social media is a facet of it, and again, necessary or not, and even being part of a complete person, you have to be whole in all parts of your life. So I know, you know, I say this to other activists all the time, like, I will get back to you, and I'm not somebody to see a message and be like, okay, you know, fuck it, I'll get back to you whenever. Like, if I don't get back to you, my phone's probably off. And there are people that know that when I'm hanging out with my girlfriend, like, that's our time, and that has to be our time. And if you want that to last and to thrive, as you should, so that you are in a place when you want to engage in something else and focus, you know, on activism itself, you don't have the distraction of I shoulda, woulda, could've in another part of my life, because I've already taken care of it. Yeah. You know.
You know, there's something to be said about self-care and making that a priority and making your physical, you know, relationships a priority, where you're actually like face to face with somebody and you're not just like I think that social media is necessary, because something that I say all the time is that for centuries, since the dawn of man, we have been trying to figure out how to spread information quickly, and now we have it. And so it is, I think it is necessary. Of course, there is the false information that gets, you know, that into the mix, but I don't think that that's anything new. I think even when we had just the printing press, people were printing,
or whatever the hell they want.
People were printing false information. You know, this isn't new. False news is not new, but you know, now we have like these tools to spread this information, and I think that's why the vegan movement has grown as much as it has, because of social media, and because, you know, Instagram is way bigger than it ever was even just 3 years ago. You know, it's this massive thing that allows us to, you know, share the information with a lot of people very fast. But you do have to know for yourself when to turn it off, because I feel myself getting sucked into it sometimes, and that doesn't make me feel good either.
Right. No, but I mean, even, and this is I guess going to become a transition into this topic. What happens when internet attention becomes your focus?
Yeah.
And how much weight and cloud is put into the words that anybody is going to put online, and at what point is it treated as gospel? And you have major news outlets that reports according to Twitter claim that blah blah blah, and that's what's and then if we need to retract the statement, we'll go back on it later, which is garbage.
Yeah.
Because people are going to believe what they heard first is fact, because I heard it first, and they'll be the first to want to spread that, regardless if it's been checked. And there's a lot that is currently infesting our very community in New York City.
Speaking of that, you have started, or you are going to start, this meeting of the minds. Essentially, is that what you're going to call it?
That's exactly what. Gathering of the minds. I don't know. Well, name to be determined, but sure.
And anyone who kind of feels that they want to have this discussion about unity and community and really squash any issues that from the outside world could, they could be looking at us like, well, these guys don't even have their shit together, so why should we even listen to them? Wow. So what was the inspiration for doing that, for starting this?
Well, in talking about social media and who people look to, I guess, for a source of truth or a source of, what next. I can say that personally, I don't air laundry on social media. I think it's absolutely pointless. I think it is going to hurt all parties involved more than anything. You have a problem with somebody, maybe that's the not so nice side of me. You have something to say it to my face. If you have something to say about another person, whether good or bad, say it to them privately. If it's for them, it doesn't need to be a show.
Yeah.
You don't have to say the truth because it'll get you likes or approval or shares or friendship. That's garbage. The truth should speak on itself. So I think a lot of where I'm going with this is I want to get back to that truth within the movement, that so much spreads on a personal level, based on who's to be believed about one particular thing, or this person has the way to get it done, or this person has the way to get it done, and there's no the singular way to get it done, or there'd be nothing to talk about right now. We'd already be there. Get back to something we'd said previously, how it takes, a united front, and it takes one's willingness to adapt their methods, because there's going to be somebody who's going to respond to you. There's going to be somebody who responds to you, to me, over anybody else at one single time, and you need a more inclusive movement. You need to have more types of people represented, not just because it's obviously the right thing to do, because nobody should ever feel excluded for something, especially when it's fighting oppression, but because if you really care about the success of your movement, you want to be allowing yourself more opportunities to reach individuals. So with going back to this gathering of the minds, there is a lot that's out there, and I'm not to say one person is more right or the other, and more often than not, it's something that people don't even really know about, or if it's a two-sided story, we all know from life there's often 12 sides, so I'm not going to get into that. But, we are adults, and we are claiming to be compassionate people, and we have to be absolutely willing to have those difficult conversations with one another if we actually care about those of whom we wish to liberate, which are so much more than ourselves, and it cannot be about us. And the dairy industry, they're loving the fact that we cannot hold our shit together. If anything, you want to get into all of the hate talk that goes on. Oh, PETA kills dogs. It's like, well, who the fuck is funding those advertisements? Who wants you to believe that? And things of that nature. And not PETA aside, I'm not saying any organization is perfect. I'm not putting them on a pedestal by any means. But even so, something like that, and PETA will be at our gathering as well.
Awesome.
A couple representatives, and I'll run off the groups momentarily that will be there. To have those adult conversations, those are not the ones to happen over the internet. It's just not. It's going to turn into a he said, she said, they said, popularity contest bullshit. And if it's coming off as ableist, I do apologize for that, because I know some incredible young people but it's very juvenile. You know what I mean? It's very high school. It's a waste of everybody's time, and it's not getting anybody to where we need to be. And that's going to be in mid-October. When I get approval from one of the venues that I'm applying for. Definitely people will know about that, and I hope to see you there, whoever you are watching this, because you probably have something to say.
You are a librarian and a teacher. In terms of like your look, do you think that kids gravitate to you more or not?
Absolutely. I also used to be a clown. Go figure. Unicycle, balloon animals, all that. Coming to a party or bar mitzvah near you. So it's fun to throw that into the mix. I've taught in clown.
Wow.
Yeah, I've taught in mime, which is interesting.
Yeah.
To try to run like a physics lab without saying a word. But it happens, and it's a blast.
Oh my God.
But yeah, no, I think children are naturally inquisitive of all ages. Children from birth to 100, you know.
Yeah.
And whether or not they're going to outwardly be receptive or look to their peers of, is it okay to mock this person? Or, you know, when somebody cracks a joke, but then they look to somebody else to see if they also laughed, because otherwise it was pointless. Like, just out of natural fear or curiosity. And I think that's something definitely to harness, particularly in the scientific field, which is my background. And, you know, so somebody will laugh, or, you know, a kid will make a joke, and I'm like, I'm happy you did that. What inspired you to do so? I'm like, well, you know, I just, I didn't expect you to ask me that. Like, and then it's like, oh, why are you looking at somebody else when, you know, you had a question or a comment? I want to hear it. You know, like, like, I'm a big boy, I can handle myself. Nothing I haven't heard before, so let's hear it. And it's like, well, you know, you are, like, you know, just getting them to spit out, well, you came in and you were wearing this, and it's like, all right. So I want everybody to see what Jason just said right now. He just made a couple of observations. He made some direct observations. He made some inferences. What else has he done? And just like that, you bring it back to the scientific method. And that's something we're all doing all the time. The three of us are actually doing this right now. It's life. So bring it back to life, and, you know, helping young people and their parents to have a better understanding of all that life has to offer, and bring it back to addressing natural inquisitiveness that we all have, instead of just suppressing it for a test score. I have a number of students' parents who come to me because they haven't graduated high school and they want to understand things better, and, you know, the school sometimes would have had a parents' night, and it's like, I'll do a lesson like, this is what we're learning this month, so you can have an idea of what your children are coming home talking about, you know. So
do you think that being a teacher in New York, it's a little bit easier to, I guess, engage the kids in that sort of fashion to make things relevant to them? I know my brother was attempting to be a teacher in New Jersey, and he was getting really stifled, and they told him that he was...
Administration?
Yes, and they told him that he was being too relevant. He was teaching history, and he was trying to make history relevant to the kids in his class.
History, you know, like what you should be doing. You should be comparing, you know, we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Do you find that teaching in New York, it's a little bit easier to make those connections for kids? I used to. Sadly, I don't do it full-time anymore. So I had been a full-time teacher for 8 years, and I've gone back to that school as substitute or as a permanent sub when teachers have been out for an extended period of time. But it did unfortunately get to a point where it wasn't as fun, both for myself and definitely for the students, and I wasn't allowed to have time to go about it the manner in which I wanted to. And so much was like, you know, I was teaching biology, and it's like, all right, well, they have the ELA test coming up, so for the next week and a half, they're just going to be taking practice ELA tests during your class time. And the kids hated it, resented it, and were like, you know, would look to me like, please, can we do something? Can we learn? Can we go to the lab? You know, like, yeah, you know. I would say I definitely had a lot more license to go about things in a more inquiry-based manner for a while. And amongst other things that were going on in my life personally, I'm not going to get into it this time, I always had told myself that if it ever got to a point where I didn't feel like I could do it my way, I was out. And I was, you know.
Do you find that your time as a teacher has kind of informed your activism?
Absolutely. A lot of the lessons you receive on your path to becoming a teacher through graduate school, which a lot of times for anybody in graduate school for education, most of it is absolute bullshit. You are paying upwards of tens of thousands of dollars to write essays in which you are regurgitating information from academia that have never once stepped foot in a classroom beyond to critique that of others. However, you are actually forced to look upon yourself and your own place in the historical canon of education. And one of the best parts that I've had from it is in talking to other teachers, and talking to those who have been there, talking to those who are already burnt out, of which there are far too many who are currently receiving paychecks and getting the summers off, and it's terrible and the kids suffer for that. Not to get too much down that path. But in going through it, it forces you to really ask yourself, am I getting my message across? And if you're doing it right, and I'm gonna be arrogant as fuck and say that I thought I did education right for the most part for my students, when you have your exam in mind, or how you're going to test the kids, or if they can accomplish this feat, if they can make these measurements and analyses correctly within a lab setting, they should be able to exhibit it concretely, in a manner of speaking. And if they are not, you fucked up and you failed. So you take that 45 home, or you take that 62. Wasn't quite up to passing. And there are many teachers I know who were like, these kids just don't get it. Like it sucks. They don't study, or they're out playing basketball, or their parents, or blah blah blah. And it's like, I've been in your class. You failed them for 2 months leading up to this test. You failed them, and it takes a lot to see that of yourself, and it's very humbling in a lot of ways. I'd had numbers of students who had failed. I've had some amazing success stories. I have, former students that are now in Ivy League schools that came from very meek and humble beginnings, or some that were first learning the English language that are now, off doing great things, succeeding, and had to learn a whole new culture amongst the language and whatever. But in failing them, and only in failing them, was able to realize what I was not actually truly providing for them. And it forced me to really look at, like, well, I don't have the answers. I want to have the answers. I know the answers in my own head. I know how to explain things the way that I was taught, and how I've applied them in a lab setting or what have you. And I think that definitely extends to animal rights activism amongst others, because your goal should be to reach those who don't see things as you do. So how do I convince them of this? It hasn't happened yet. Some of our best friends or family members or loved ones, oh, I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's great that you're out there, doing what have. But if you don't see things the way I have, then, in some way, it's not just you sucking. It's not just, conditioning of society, which it definitely is. I've also failed you to this point, and I have to do better, and I will do better. I promise you that. And that's definitely something I want to say. Like, teaching taught me patience. Teaching taught me to be more self-critical than I ever had been prior to.
Yeah. Well, you're also a very even-keeled person. Do you do any sort of meditation or anything of that?
Oh yeah, no, yoga. Definitely, I just go for walks, and I try to explain the benefits of walking. Not like to go to the store, not like, oh, I walk to the train to sit down, to get elbowed, to get kneed in the crotch while I was trying to get from point A to B. No, I'm saying walking for the sake of walking. And again, I had mentioned my pup, El Jefe, prior to, and he definitely comes through in more moments than I could try to quantify, where I could have had whatever day, and he's like, let's go outside, and we're there, and we're at the beach, or we're at the park. I live right by Coney Island, so taking that hour and just centering myself to where I need to be, it's like, I could go back out there tomorrow. I can deal with being called a jobless, socialist, hippie, all of which might have at some point been true, or, whatever. And yeah, like, just self-care is beyond important, and it goes beyond yoga, which is definitely part of it, eating right. You are what you eat. There's a lot of truth to that. Everything that your grandmother told you growing up, if you, had that grandmother that I did, was right, and it came from somewhere. Thank you, Grandma. And, you know, realizing that what you put out into the world is going to come back to you. And there are so many within this movement as well, part of which I want to definitely address at the Gathering of the Minds, that carry so much hate in their heart. And you ask yourself, like, would you listen to you? You know, if you're, whoever your target audience is right now, are you going to internalize what is coming out of your mouth, the manner in which it's being delivered, or are you just going to dismiss this as being the rantings of a lunatic?
Yeah. Actually, to sort of segue, I'm reaching a little bit, but not too much. Yeah.
I was reaching. Yeah.
In our want to talk about Kaporos and all the efforts because it's so fresh. You know, we did the Department of Health disruption, and I mean, you said it was 2 hours long. I remember standing there like, how long has it been? But,
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that is frustrating for us, I know, is that a lot of the people that work there, you know, we're shouting, and of course it has, like, it absolutely has its merit and its place, like what we're doing, and I would never, I don't mean to knock it at all, like we should continue doing these things, but I know that it's also frustrating for us to be standing there with these pictures, with, this time we went back with dead chickens
With
that had been
remains
picked
of-
up off the street, and have people walk by and laugh at us, or walk
Sure.
by and not even, like, you know, register, and it's like, how do you not, how can you not even look at us? You know, and like, and just be like, I just need to get out the door, you know?
Well, again, not to cut you off right
No,
there. Are you good?
cut
Yeah.
me off.
Oh,
That's
no.
the end of my-
Cut.
my
Sorry.
rant.
Well, you know, it goes back to agenda, and it goes back to goals, and it goes back to being dedicated to both, and understanding somebody doesn't want to look at you. Why? It's difficult.
Yeah.
Why is it difficult? Because I'm a part of this. Because I continue to allow this to happen. You know, that's where they're coming from. It's not, you know, they're an asshole or they're a jerk or whatever, you know, we have heard people on our own side readily use to describe such people. And again, taking that breath, whether it's literally or figuratively, sometimes both, and saying, you know, at one point I didn't want to look. You know, being honest to that, and it's like, well, why didn't I want to look? How did I eventually get past it? And again, if you're being honest with yourself and not being full of yourself, to the point of like, well, I just figured it out, me, you know, or what have you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can appreciate that this person is in need of assistance in realizing the truth. And to that, so, you know, well, you think about it, you say, well, why can't I look? Well, if I'm looking, that means I acknowledge it. If I acknowledge it, that means I acknowledge myself. If I acknowledge myself, I have two choices. I'm going to be in a lot of pain. I'm going to cry. I'm going to want to have to change something. And, well, holy shit, how can I change anything because I'm perfect? Or then for those who are physically right there, you know, like that's their job.
Yeah.
And for those who are dealing with who knows what else at home, if they have a home to go home to, if they have a centered home to go home to, you know, like their job could be their outlet, and now I have to deal with this, you know, and it's not excusing it. It's not saying it's right, but it's understanding human behavior, and it's understanding the way in which they're going to internalize everything that is outside and being pushed upon them. And yeah, it's draining as hell. It's physically demanding. And it's interesting that you brought up teaching. I very much liken it to that of some of the best teachers that I had known in my life who got burnt out in it. You know, activism is overrun with burnout, and a lot of, you know, really dedicated, you know, souls are out there pushing themselves beyond the point where they're burnt out. And it's like, you're not helping anybody, you're not helping yourself, and you're making yourself more mentally unable to participate here in a positive way, an effective way. It's very hard to tell somebody that. To say you can't be here or you shouldn't be here. And it's like, well, who are you?
Yeah.
But I think that if you truly care about yourself as part of a group, and if you truly care about other people that you're noticing having a hard time, struggling finding a way to internalize what's going on with them, you know, you need to call it out. And you shouldn't do so online. To go back to that, it should not be a rant. It should not be like, well, this person can't hold their phone. You know, that does nothing.
Yeah.
Again, you're the jerk. And those who are profiting off of what we are fighting against love to see that. So cut the shit. Give a call, pull somebody to the side and be like, hey, I just, you know, could be on the spot, could be afterwards. And I think that's something that has to happen more in activism. We have to be willing to have those difficult conversations. And there are those who would rather not, because they don't want to be seen as a guilty party. They don't want to be seen as vegan police or what have you. Yeah. Because there's such a fear of a backlash of that. And it's like, well, fear is only going to add to this being normalized. Fear is what keeps people from speaking out about anything against any oppression. It's fear. Mm-hmm. And if we can't have, you know, a regulated sense that we can be open and frank with one another about this, especially when somebody is not at their best, then we are allowing ourselves to fail the animals. And we cannot do that. A little bit more on Kaporos. Because of work-related issues and some other personal issues, which again I'm not going to get into right now, I was unfortunately unable to attend the last night of the Kaporos actions. And I was following everything while at work and during my commutes to and from work. And all I could feel, aside from the obvious pain and sorrow for all of these animals that were being massacred in our streets, you know, was a sense of overflowing positivity and warmth, and seeing the true potential of what the New York City animal rights activist movement can actually be. And seeing so many different groups, and it's like, oh, this person's part of this group, and this is this group, or they're on this side of this coin. And they were able to just put it all aside and just put, you know, the animals first. And there's so much of that needs to be spoken about, in the sense that, hey, you know, this has happened before and it was effective. And there were hundreds of lives that were saved from death on our streets. And the absolute, you know, again, I'm lack of words here, but like heartwarming connection that was taking place from daily street activists busting their ass, linking up with sanctuaries, doing all of the work that people do not get enough credit for, and those who are in sanctuaries do not get enough credit for what they're doing. You know, we want to say, empty the cages. Where do they go? Yeah. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, our naysayers on the street will say, well, where are they supposed to go? Sanctuary? And like, yeah, there's a few in our city area. Do you want directions to one right now? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot that goes into saving the life of an animal, and it's, you know, it can be sharing a post, it can be going out on the streets, it can be losing your lungs, it can be the night shift, and I'll leave it at that. Yeah. And they all have a place here. But in seeing just all the positives, I don't think that's something that anyone can outright deny, the passion and the effectiveness of what took place. And I just want to say, for anybody watching this, for those who are heading up the battles against Kaporos this year, this is not, I know you don't do anything to receive name recognition, you know who you are, but it was hands down the most effective that I would say of any year that I've participated in it prior to. We did not give the general population to which we were addressing any reason to outright dismiss us based on our behavior. And, you know, that goes back to being critiqued and being able to critique and to take it and be like, okay, what you know, not just, fuck you, I know everything, like, you know, but like literally, what can I do to get better? And this was a genuine result of people saying, I don't have it figured out, this is not working. And people were willing to bite their tongue. People who are literally more, usually more outspoken, were like, all right, I'm going to step back on this one. There are people who have not been so forthcoming, who all of a sudden were like, well, what can I do? Or when asked to do something, we're like, yeah, I can do that. Mm-hmm. You know, so there was a lot more of a team effort. There was a very specific focus, especially in how we were to conduct ourselves, the language, the fact that we had, you know, multiple organizations coming together. That Jewish Veg had not worked with us in years past. Right. The Save movement, that Anita was coming down from Canada. Yeah. And I have spoken to a lot of people since then and surrounded then, and a lot of people have shared a renewed faith in what this movement can be and the potential for community and coexistence with unity, and just that like unity is not to happen for a day. It's not a slogan. It's not a catchphrase. It's not on a t-shirt. It's useless. It's a buzzword. If you want to really strive for unity, then you have to be willing to accept your part in it and be willing to accept that you do not have all the answers and that you have a lot to learn, and that we all do, regardless of our level of experience, our level of involvement to this point, our level of leadership. Everybody has something to offer, and a lot of times that can only happen if you're willing to shut the fuck up and listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Leo, thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming here and speaking with us. We so appreciate your expertise and your knowledge on all different subjects, but especially that of how to bring our community together so that we are a united
Here's
front.
hoping.
I know, but
But I have faith. That's
we in order for this to grow, and also to get vegans to become activists.
And to not be shied away from activism.
Yeah, there are plenty of vegans out there that don't get active because they don't want to be associated with what activism is perceived as right now in this moment.
Right.
Yeah. So, but thank you again.
Thank you
so much for coming, guys. Make sure that you subscribe below. Check out all of our other content. We have so many other episodes, and we will catch you on the next one.